All right, what's going on, guys? You got Quasi here for Quasi Media Network and Quasi Animation Studio, where you currently and presently are. Right now, we're going to talk about some volume and making the scene look a certain way. Now, this is not necessarily a lighting tutorial, but it's definitely to show you how to add a little, tight out to the shot. Now, I've talked about this before, but the reason why I'm going to do this here specifically is I find that a lot of times you may have a certain set you want to have a certain feeling on. So this particular set is this like temple, right? So I'm gonna go and I'm gonna just add some light. So let's go into render mode. This is in Eevee. You can do this in cycles. And I'll show both examples. So here we're gonna do our lighting. We're gonna start in Eevee. I tend to do one thing over everything. I bring in the sun and I take it up to 90 meters above everything. And the reason for this is so I can tell which direction I'm turning it in. When it's down here, I can see it, but it just feels weird to me. So that's my own personal thing. Okay, so of course we're in Eevee, so we're going to turn on occlusion, screen space reflections, bloom, etc. Blah blah blah. All right, so I'm going to go to like 120. I want to blow it out because that is realistic. Okay, I'm going to take the bias all the way down to 0.001. Now I'm going to find the angle that I want. So I want that sort of like just after morning feel. Let's see. I think that one should be good because the way this is set up is a little bit different from everything else. So you see how like this is not casting a specific shadow type. So let me go see something here. I think the shadows are off. Yep. So I'll go hashed on that. Or should I go clip? I'll go opaque. I'll go clip. All right. So I did it on the wrong thing. Let me find it. All right, it's on that one. Okay. So I want shadows on this one, so I'll go hashed. And now we got shadows on the ground, okay? All right. So now, under lighting, I'm going to bring in a mesh. I'm going to make it a cube. I'm just going to call it fog, okay? And then we're going to go right here to the object properties. When I go to object properties, what I'm going to do is go to display, in front, turn off shadow, go to bounds. And we're going to go over to textures, rename that fog real fast. Remove the texture because I'm in remove the principal shader, and then in density 0.01. And then let's say we wanted to seem like it's an early morning, so I want to have like that almost like reddish orangish light. So I'm going to take that to that level, okay? And I wanted to go more towards the sun, so in the positive, so we go 0.15. Right, so I'm going to push it towards the sun more. Now what I'm going to do is I hit 1 on the keyboard so I can push this up, and then hit 7. So I'm going to hit Shift S to scale, Shift Z, and then I'm just going to make it bigger to fit my scene. Okay, now then we're going to go to the front by hitting 1, and now it's in front of it. So I'll scale it up a little bit more. Control A, scale. Now there's a reason for that because of the trick I'm about to use right now. Okay, so we'll have this clicked, and we're going to go into the shading tab, go back into shading mode, and then in the object panel for the shaders, we're gonna hold Control Shift and then drag across, and if Node Wrangler is selected, and it'll give me a mix shader. So I'm gonna bring in a color ramp, a noise texture. I'm gonna Control T to bring up the mapping and coordinate nodes. I'm not even gonna plug in the plug anything in yet. And then I'm going to bring in a gradient texture. So the gradient texture is going to allow me to split this in half. Okay. So we're going to duplicate the mapping node. Going to jack the coordinate node into that mapping node, and then that mapping node into the gradient node. Then I'm going to do again Control Shift drag across the noise and gradient textures and open up the mapping node and leave it on mix. Turn that color. Take the mix node and put it into the factor of the color round. So on this gradients mapping node, on the Y, we're going to go 90. Okay. Well, in this case, go negative 90. We're going to start there and see just how it's working, if at all. All right. So when we click it, it should give me a split. Now, currently, I don't see it. All right. So let me explain why. All right. Well, let me show you what to do. Okay. So here on the color ramp, we're going to pull the dark side up. And we're going to pull the light side up. Okay, so clearly on the light side, we can see that it's breaking it up, right? but I want this to go towards the ground, like push up or down, right? So let's go 90 on the mapping node again. So now we see that it's down here below. So on the mapping node for the gradient texture, on the X location, we're going to drag it up, down into the negative until we start to see it rise up. Okay, because we want to have some control over that. All right, and over here on the noise texture, I'm gonna take it to about 20, so we break it up. No, matter of fact, keep it simple. It was on 5. Let's make it 3. No, 8. I like 8. All right, cool. So on this far side, if you look at on the color ramp, on the dark side, when you pull it up, it makes it much more darker, and the density goes up if you move the white side. So we'll move the white side to create more density. On the bottom mapping node, I'm gonna pull it up some so it'll keep a certain level of it. I'm gonna bring it up some more. So now we have it just above the top of the thing. So now we see how this looks with the light. So I'm gonna redo, let's take it, go further this way so that there's more tree on the temple. There we go. All right, so hold on. Yeah, there we go. All right, so now we have that set up. Now another touch, if you're using a pure sky or dynamic sky, turn it on. It's going to switch over to cycles, but we're going to switch that back to Eevee, because again, when we do cycles, we're going to handle this a little bit more differently. Go back up to the world shader. I'm going to go to dynamic sky, click that. Now when you come over here, it's got its own sun. We're going to get rid of that, take that to 0. All right, so on the bottom here, you have your shading that's on the bottom, of course, duh. And then you have the opacity and the brightness of the clouds. So I'm going to bring it down just ever so a bit. And then here, I want the sky to sort of be almost like a pinkish color, like it's just waking up. And yeah, so the bottom one, I'll bring up some more because I want it to follow that. And then on the brightness level for it, we just start bringing it down some, just a little, not a lot. And on this saturation, the shadow color saturation, if you go to 0, it tends to get rid of the color. Like if you look over here, you can tell. You can see that it's not as saturated anymore if you just take that down. So I sometimes take it down to like 0.65. And it's just one of those things I do. It's not a requirement. Okay, so let's go back into layout. And then let's look at this from the camera view. So we turn on our camera, go in there, I'm gonna lock it to view. All right, and then let's turn the overlay off, and now we look at it, and there you have it. So now let's play with it a little bit. So from the camera view, we can see just how we can see the details that we sort of want, maybe not. All right, so I'm gonna find, I think it should be, if that was 10, it would say 20 meters. Yeah, there we go. And let's hit render. I just want to see what the result's gonna be. Okay, so let me pull this back a little bit more. Let's make this 35. All right, yeah. Let's make sure that we get a little bit of everything in there. All right, cool. All right, so now what I want to do is I'm going to go over to the shape node, go back into the camera view, and I'm going to play with the brightness level of the fog, just to get it just where it's like just sort of early morning feel. Like I said, you can push it more towards the sun. If you see that, you can see it's shifting. So I'm gonna push it a little bit more towards the sun. And then on the background, back in the layout, going up to the create tab to dynamic sky, I want that background to sort of go more towards the pink. And I'm gonna crank the brightness up to 1.2. There we go. All right, now, boom. So this is how you kind of play with it to get those sort of feelings that you want. And this is one of the things I was looking at. So now we're seeing this in Eevee. Let's look at it in cycles. Now, when we turn on cycles, I want you to fully comprehend now that in cycles, this is going to be very, very bright. You see how the volume is playing out? So what I want to do there, because I don't need it to be very high, is I'm going to go over to it. And I'm going to, hold on, let's go into shade node. I'm going to actually bring it down because it's too much on it right now. And it's nothing with the PC. It's just getting the look right. Now, what I want to also make note of is in the render settings in your light path, we're gonna switch this over to fast global illumination. And then we can see here we have a setting for volume. It says at 2. I'm gonna take it up to 12. And then what I'll do, because on mine is at 128, we're gonna go 256, and we're gonna hit render. And let's see what it looks like on the render after it's finished. I do not have denoising on, so it will be noisy. But you can see the difference in the shadows inside of the temple in Cycles versus Eevee. Now, there's a way to fix that, but it involves using an iridescence volume. And because there's volume in the scene, Cycles is going to take a little bit longer than it would on this shot. Now, again, it's nice, but if you don't want to take that long, then, you know, hey. Again, there's no denoiser on this, so once it finishes, which is here shortly, it will not have denoiser. As you see here, it's still noisy, but you can also see where your volume is. Feel me? So one of the things I wanted to make note of is when we're talking about an Eevee. Let me go back over here. You see in Eevee how I got bright inside of the temple. So I turned something off that I wasn't supposed to turn off. So if we go opaque. Let me click the sun. Let me make sure. Yeah, so make sure your contact shadows are on, and they are. And that's the thing. Like if you look here in the corner, you can see how the light's breaking through. But when I turn them on, it doesn't do it anymore. So when I start turning up the bias, if you look at the bias, you can see how far the shadow goes. If you look here under here and there in the cracks, you can see when you bring the bias down just how much it works. So you look at the distance, you can change the distance or whatnot. So let's see how when I change the distance, even this side shadow changes. Feel me? Thickness level. And this is one of the things you can use to make adjustments with your shadows in Eevee to get close to what it is that you want. And that's one of the things that I find a lot of people are not talking about. Okay. Even here in your distances, let's say we put this at 30, you can see the difference. If you look here in this shadow right here on the cascade map and I go 30, it changes. You see how that disappeared in that corner right there? And I go back to 100, it goes further. So if it say I go 600, how much further could it take it? So this is one of the things we're finding those areas. And then of course you got a shadow fade. And then of course the count or the number of textures used to, like I said, the number of textures used by the cascade shadow map. So of course you got distribution, which is automatically at 0.8. Feel me? So knowing those things, let's take this to 6. Knowing those things, you're able to push your shadow levels and all those things forward. So I always, on the bias, I tend to bring it to 0.001 for a reason, so I can get a full shadow length. But you see on the inside how that shadow starts to cover now versus how it was at first. That's one of the things that I know that a lot of people don't note. So it's like, just because the default settings there doesn't mean you can't go in and make adjustments to those default settings. So with that being said, man, hope they help somebody. And hey, see you on the flip side. Nothing but love.